All right, guys, what's going on? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. And this one is going to be 13 reasons as to why you should play XDefiant. Now, these are reasons why as to why I still play, and these are all based off of my experience. So your experience may be a little bit different for those of you that do play, but for those of you that haven't played yet, or maybe you're kind of going back and forth on it, hopefully this will encourage you to kind of maybe go back, give or take. And I just thought I'd make a video since XDefiant content is a little bit dry. But after all this time, I thought to myself, I'm sure people, if you take content creation out of the equation, it's like, why do I still play this game? So it's like, okay, this is where this idea came from. And just for those of you guys that are wondering, yes, there will be an additional video made as to why you should not play XDefiant. So there are definitely things about this game that can turn people off or turn them away from the game. It certainly has done that already. So that will be another video. But we're going to start on the positive side of things, and then we're going to go on the other side in a separate video. Doing both of these at once in one video would be way too long, and I didn't want to do that. So without further ado, let's get into this, because I already did 2 takes and the video ended up being too long, so I'm going to try to go a little bit faster on this one. Okay, so oh, by the way, just because something is number 1 doesn't mean it's the most important, and just because something's number 13 doesn't mean it's the least important. These are just things in random order that I came up on the top of my head, and then I made a little list of for this video. So let's get right into it. So my number 1 thing is that there's no EOMM/SBMM. Whenever we mention SBMM in any game and we're complaining about it, we're actually referring to EOMM, and I think we're all familiar with what it is at this point. And if not, look up YouTube videos. I even made multiple videos talking about it and why it's so bad, etc., etc. And at the same time, it allows for a fast connection in order to get games. Ping is king. Everything in match feels better, and obviously the netcode in this game still needs some work, but other than that, you know, it's literally ping is king, and it gives everybody an equal opportunity to take advantage and get better, you know, at this point, as opposed to being a rigged experience that holds you by the hand and that keeps you from getting better, because it keeps your experience literally on a game-to-game basis the exact same. Whereas something to where ping is king, like this game here, with no algorithm in the background that messes with you, literally anything can happen from a game-to-game basis. So including opportunity to get better. So anyway, with that being said, let's go on to number 2. Movement. When the game first came out, it felt kind of clunky, but after a few changes in the settings menu, and then of course after a few updates that the game implemented, the game has only felt more responsive, and I really love the movement. I love the freedom that you have within the movement. Obviously the bunny hopping and air strafing thing has been recently nerfed, and it's getting to the point to where the game is actually grounded, you know, to where its foundation actually makes the difference, to where it's like, hey, you play a first person shooter, your foundation of where your position is on the map as well as your gun skill should always make a difference within game. So if there's something out there that gives you way too many get out of jail free cards to a point to where it's an exploit, of course that needs to be addressed, which is what they recently did. So but at the same time, the option to be able to do a few of these things is still there, but they're not as cheesy, and of course the animations have been improved. So yeah, movement feels great in the game, and I really love how responsive it is, at least with my experience, and especially since it's been improved since launch. All right, moving on to number 3, I really like the pros and cons system in this one. In other games like Call of Duty, for instance, you have way too many attachments and way too many combinations of attachments, and in some cases you even have a situation to where it's like very one-sided, to where it only favors, like, let's say a more passive playstyle, so to speak, in terms of pros and cons. But in this game, it's a lot more balanced, to where it's like you can literally make multiple different setups per weapon, and I actually like that. It's the best, and at the same time, there's not a zillion attachments per weapon category, which I, for one, can appreciate. So you can literally set up different weapon combinations with the same weapon and have it play a different way in accordance to, like, let's say a specific game mode that you play, or if you just feel like playing a little bit more passive, or you feel like playing a little bit more aggressive, you can literally adjust the attachments for the weapon to act a little bit differently in accordance to what you feel like playing or what you are playing. All right, and I really like that. So let's move on to the next one. Number 4, dev support. In terms of the transparency of the devs, and in terms of what they are trying to do with the game, the support that this game is giving its community is great. Now, obviously, the community is not going to agree with everything the devs do, and of course, whenever Mark Rubin or Aches or whatnot, just to name a couple examples, you know, when they're not as active on Twitter or X for a certain period of time, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, these guys are not communicating at all. It's like, hey, dude, remember, these guys have to work. They can't just, you know, spend an hour out of their day every day talking to people on Twitter. You know, that hour is very precious time if you're working, you know, 10 to 12 hours a day. And on top of that, you've got other things to worry about in terms of the development and other things as well, being an executive producer. So, but whenever he does get on and whenever he does communicate, it's more frequent, it's a lot more transparent, and it is constant. It's not like something that is completely died down after the release of the game, unlike some other game franchises out there. And I can certainly appreciate that. So, all right, let's keep going here. On to the next one. Number 5. Good maps. I think we all know at this point, if you've been playing first-person shooters for a certain period of time, we all know how important maps are, right? It can make or break a game, literally. You can have a game that has the best netcode in the world. You can have a game that's got the best hit detection in the world, great weapons, good connection, good mechanics, a lot of great features. But then all of a sudden, if the game has shitty maps, it is very easy to ruin the experience, right? It's kind of like, wow, this game feels great, but at the same time, it's like, oh, I got to play on this map, I got to play on this map, I got to play on that map. Man, this game's maps suck. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're taking the maps from another game and putting it into a game that's supposed to be different and just kind of adding it in there. It's like, but with the devs have really nailed it with the maps in this game. Obviously there's a few maps that I like more than others, but for the most part, the maps are very solid. You can rush in all of them. The objective-based gameplay in the maps are great. Even in team deathmatch, these maps work very well, especially if you know your routes and you're familiar with the maps. You can still gain advantage on people. You can gain position. You can, and sure, you can also play a lot more passive, but at the same time, it's very well balanced to where it's like, you got to know how to rush properly. And at the same time, if you're going to be a camper, you need to know how to camp properly. And you also have to know that there's always an element of risk, as opposed to you get into this spot, you're always safe no matter what, So I like that sort of balance. And I love the lanes. I like that. The maps are great in this game. I got to tip my hat to the devs on that. All right, let's move on to the next one. Number 6. Good weapon balance. The MDR and the M4 have gotten a recent buff, but they're not buffed so heavy to where they're like the most powerful weapon now. They're actually just more viable. They're somewhere in the middle, as they should be. And of course, some of the SMGs and stuff like that. And of course, the snipers have gotten a few adjustments, and they're a little bit less cheesy now, so that's a good thing. And yet at the same time, for people that are like sniping, gods, they're still able to do some of the things that they're able to do. But they've gotten that to a point to where it's like, skill will be required in order to do some of the things that these snipers are able to do, as opposed to anybody who gets a sniper is able to do all this cheesy stuff. So just to give a few examples, but weapon balance in a game like this is very hard to do, and it's one of the things that the devs have definitely done right. So I'm very interested to see what other weapons come out and how those are going to be handled in the future as well. But I think we're in a good spot at this point. I really do. So props to the devs yet again. All right, moving on to the next one. I really like the time to kill in this game. The time to kill is really good. It's a 100 base health game, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like 125. And obviously if you're a Phantom, it feels like 145. But again, if you use certain weapons like the M16 that you guys know I love to use, it seems like the Phantoms pretty much don't exist. You don't even have to use the cleaners. The cleaners doesn't really make that much of a difference anyway. It only makes an 8 health difference. So even if you use the cleaners, it doesn't make that much of a difference on Phantoms. But certain weapons against Phantoms do a really good job, as if the Phantoms extra health didn't exist. Like for instance, the M16, a really good example of that. But for the most part, the time to kill is great in this game. It's not like ridiculously slow, but it's certainly, not fast enough to where it feels like you're playing hardcore every game. I think certain titles have managed to obviously change up their time to kill, but I really like where we are in terms of time to kill here. When you get in a gunfight, unless you get a bunch of headshots, or unless you're in close quarters combat against a shotgun, or unless you get melted by a sniper from the other side of the map, for the most part, the gunfights actually feel like gunfights. There are instances to where it doesn't feel like that because of the netcode, but again, once that's fixed, it's really good. But again, going from my experience, the time to kill has been great. So anyway, let's move on. Headshots matter. Obviously, this makes a difference in the time to kill department, but it's not to where you feel like you're being melted, right? Obviously, again, if you feel like you're being melted at any point in time to where it's like an instant death, it's usually either because, you ran into somebody with a shotgun in close quarters combat, or you got melted by a sniper. And of course, in other instances, again, depending on your particular experience in terms of the netcode, when you get into a gunfight, if it's it's going to feel good for the most part. But again, the inconsistencies of the netcode that some of you guys have been having that are more inconsistent than my experience make it feel pretty bad. But when things, again, with my experience, again, the time to kill has been great. And the fact that the headshots, can make a little bit of a difference without seemingly feeling like you've been melted is awesome. So it's again, I love the fact that there's actually gunfights in this game. So that's awesome. All right, let's move on to the next one. It's still a casual game, but at the same time, it's still got a skill gap, which is great. if somebody's experienced at a first-person shooter, or if somebody's good at these types of games because of the experience that they have, and they have a certain level of understanding of the game because they played it for a while and they got to understand and know how the game works, those players are always going to have an advantage because of the time that they put in. It's literally no different than anything else. But in terms of the way the devs throw you a bone in this game, they do it in two ways. Number one, the way the factions work and with how they are in accordance to objective-based gameplay. Anybody of any skill level can have a significant impact in that department, but at the same time, it also gives you that balanced experience as best as it can, right? To where it's like, okay, you've got your good skill players, you got your bad skill players, you got everybody in between. So that is actually what gets you better, because you will face players that are better than you. There's always someone bigger and better than you are, right? But despite that, you're still going to get those other players that are not as good and that are somewhere in between. And that is what actually allows you to get better, right? That's what my experience was. And if it wasn't for that experience, I would have probably never seen the fact that I gotten better, and probably never gotten better because it was a rigged experience. And I know that kind of goes into the SBM, MEOMM category, but again, in terms of how it works with the factions and how the objective-based gameplay works, as well as the matchmaking itself, it's a game that manages to have a skill gap as well as being casual friendly. And in the beginning, if you're a casual player, it may not seem so, but give the game time, just like everything else, just like getting a new job or whatnot. You may not be as good, but then eventually you will get good and you will adjust. You will. It's just a matter of you giving it the time and giving yourself time and adjusting. So, all right, moving on. Number 10, future content. We already know that the year one content has already been completed. And at this point right now, they're just focusing on expanding the dev team and as well as working on that netcode, which is definitely number one priority. This has been mentioned already. So, but in terms of the future content and features that this game is going to get, again, it's not one of those games that is just designed to be supported for like a year, and then after that, never be heard from again. And as long as the game continues to have enough players that play it to afford the dev support to continue to get that kind of support and for the game to live on, then that's fine. It's not going to have nearly as much of a high player count as some of the more popular games out there. But if it's enough to where you can still find matches reasonably fast and there's still a decent amount of players playing, there's at least a chance that some players, a very small percentage of players can come back and play because of what the future holds for this game. And as long as we have at least that kind of support and the game's not dead, there's still hope. So again, as long as that little flame doesn't burn out completely, there's still hope. So, and the potential is still there. Again, I don't think it's ever going to get to the point to where the player count is going to be as nearly as impressive as it first was when the game released. But at the same time, if it does get a little bit of a shot in the arm, then we'll take it, right? It may not ever be nearly as popular as it ever was again, but if it can go from being like a number 50, in most played games on console or something like that, to like, let's say a 30, then again, that's an improvement. And I think I speak for every XDefiant supporter when I say, hey, we'll take it. If there's only room for improvement, and as long as the game is not dead, there's a chance for that to happen. So there could be a small resurgence. You just never know. Only time will tell, and we can only remain hopeful. All right, let's move on to the next one. It's free to play. I really don't need to say anything else. It's free to play. It doesn't cost you anything to play this game. All right, let's move on to the next one. Number 12. Again, through factions and abilities, it really encourages objective-based gameplay. Objective-based gameplay is something that other games have strived to make better, and in a lot of ways they have. Like with, for instance, in Call of Duty and Modern Warfare 3, they introduced a point streak system, which helped quite a bit. And then in Black Ops 2, they had the score streak system, which helped even more. But at the same time, it never reached its full potential for one reason or another. But with XDefiant, it manages to get a little bit closer because of how the factions work and everything like that. And I think the little bit of the Overwatch mentality a little bit that's kind of seeped into XDefiant a little bit is a good thing. And we've certainly got some Overwatch players that have played XDefiant as well. So and Overwatch players are very, very much objective-based game players. And the fact that this game has some of that into its community and into its culture in and of itself is definitely a good thing. If you're going to play an objective-based game mode, chances are people will be playing the shit out of the objective. And I see it all the time, which is great. So you're always going to have a few people that are just trying to kill whore here and there. But for the most part, again, that's what Team Deathmatch is for, and which has certainly helped. So anyway, let's move on to the last one. Of course, it's not pay to win. After you get done, like even if you don't finish the battle pass, and again, you don't have to buy the battle pass to get the weapons, but even if you don't finish it, I think you can still get the weapons via challenges, which is great. But there's no pay to win. Everything is cosmetic. We're not talking like Advanced Warfare or Call of Duty Black Ops 3 XMC here. So every weapon is attainable, and that's great. And I'm even glad that Call of Duty seems to have to have gone away with that, to where it's like, hey, any of the new weapons are in the free portion of the battle pass, which is obviously a good thing. But Call of Duty from what I understand, Call of Duty has its own version of pay to win, to where it's like, if you buy something from the store, you'll probably get easier lobbies or something like that. But I don't know if that's true anymore. Again, I haven't touched the COD since the beginning of Vanguard, so I don't really know or care anymore. But I just thought I'd mention that, because again, the subject is pay to win, and there's always different interesting ways to where you can squeeze pay to win into your game. But for the most part, in terms of traditional pay to win, in terms of how things used to be, like Advanced Warfare, or like, let's say a Black Ops 3, just to name a few, that's non-existent in this game, which is great. It's cosmetic only, which is awesome, and it's something that should remain that way. But anyway, guys, if there's anything you want to add on to this list, let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.